The closet is open. You are standing in front of it. You have been standing in front of it for 6 minutes. You are not choosing an outfit. You are managing a problem that was built long before this morning, and one that Japan solved so quietly you have never once seen the solution. The wardrobe in front of you right now holds 27 items. Not 27 outfits. 27 items total. Tops, trousers, a jacket, 2 dresses, a coat. Each one in the same soft palette, neutrals that move between each other without conflict or negotiation. Each one in good condition. Each one belonging, without question, to the person standing in front of it right now. You reach in. You take the first thing your hand finds. It works. It has always worked. Everything in here works with everything else because nothing was allowed in that didn't already work with what was there. You are dressed in 40 seconds. 40 seconds from opening to done. Not because this woman is more disciplined than you. Not because she has less to do this morning. Not because she woke up earlier or thought about this the night before. Because the question of what to wear was answered long before this morning began. Not last night, not last week. Answered once, completely, some time ago, and never needed to be answered again. And somewhere else, in your bedroom, in a city that is probably not Kyoto, a version of this morning is unfolding differently. A closet is open. There are more things in it than anyone could wear in 3 weeks. Some of them fit, some of them used to fit. Some of them were bought for a trip that didn't happen, a version of the day that never arrived, a person you were briefly going to become. Most of them are fine. None of them are quite right. And the 6 minutes that have already passed are not the cost. They are the beginning of the cost. By the end of this, you will understand exactly what you have been paying, and exactly what Japan decided, decades ago, was not worth paying at all. You have a theory about why your mornings are hard. Maybe it is the sleep. You have not been sleeping well, and you know it, and you keep meaning to address it. Maybe it is the phone. The immediate reach for it the moment your eyes open. The flood of information before the nervous system has had a chance to arrive at itself. Maybe it is the coffee, or the lack of it, or the timing of it. You have read about all of these things. You have adjusted some of them, and some mornings are better, and some mornings are the same as they were before. Here is what the theory leaves out. Before you reached for the phone, before you made the coffee, before any of the morning habits you have been carefully building had a chance to do their work, you stood in front of a closet and spent 6 minutes in a state of low-grade decision-making that cost you something you cannot get back. Psychologist Roy Baumeister, whose research on willpower and decision fatigue has been published and replicated for over 2 decades, documented a finding that should have changed the way every person in the developed world thinks about their morning. Decision fatigue is real. The ability to make decisions, clearly, without the distortion of exhaustion, without the reactive shortcutting that comes when the mechanism is running low, is a finite resource. Every decision you make draws from it, and unlike most resources, it does not replenish during the day, it replenishes overnight. Every morning you wake up with a full reserve, and then you open the closet. 6 minutes of choosing, real choosing, cognitive effort, visual scanning, rejecting, reconsidering, settling, draws from the reserve before the day has asked anything of you yet, before the work, before the meeting, before the conversation you have been dreading, the problem you have been putting off, the decision you genuinely need to make well because it matters. By the time any of those arrive, you are already operating with a reserve that was depleted in a wardrobe you don't even remember opening. Japan noticed this, not as a productivity problem, not as a self-optimization opportunity, as a question that deserved an honest answer. What if the morning's cognitive budget belonged to the morning? There is a study from 2011 that changed how researchers understand the relationship between choice and well-being. Barry Schwartz, a psychologist at Swarthmore College, had already spent years documenting what he called the paradox of choice, the finding, counterintuitive and now extensively replicated, that more options do not produce more satisfaction. They produce more anxiety, more second-guessing, more regret about the options not chosen, and more difficulty arriving at any choice at all. The study found that people who had fewer options available to them reported higher satisfaction with their eventual choice than people who had more. Not because the fewer option choice was objectively better, Because the mind that has less to reject arrives at its decision without the residue of everything it considered and dismissed. A wardrobe with 140 items is not a resource. It is a daily version of this experiment, run on your prefrontal cortex at 7:08 every morning. But the cost goes further than decision fatigue. Dr. Darby Saxby at the University of Southern California, the same researcher whose work on environmental cortisol and household clutter has been widely cited, found that visual exposure to objects that signal incompleteness, aspiration, or past identity produces a measurable cortisol response even without conscious awareness of it. Not the anxiety you feel when you see the unpaid bill. The lower, quieter response, the one that accumulates without ever rising to the level of a thought. The one that you can only detect by measuring the hormone directly, because the person experiencing it has long since stopped noticing it is there. In a closet, these objects are everywhere. The dress from a size ago, kept because getting rid of it feels like giving up. The suit bought for a job that became a different kind of job. The gym clothes for the version of the week that has not quite arrived yet. The beautiful blouse that requires a specific bra you never seem to have available, so you move it aside every morning and feel a small and nameless thing as you do. Each one of these objects is not just taking up space, it is sending a signal. And the signal it sends, every morning, in the 6 seconds your eyes pass over it, is not neutral. It says, you are not quite the person you intended to be. That signal is cortisol. Low, chronic, repeated. The kind that does not produce the acute stress response of a genuine emergency, but accumulates across weeks and months into the particular exhaustion of a person who cannot identify why they are tired before they have even left the house. Japan does not keep those objects. Not because Japan has less sentiment, less hope, or less of a past. Because Japan understood something that most of the world is still trying to articulate in the language of productivity and self-improvement. The closet is not storage. It is the first conversation of every day, and the question is, what does that conversation say to you? There is a word built from 3 Japanese characters that means, roughly, to refuse, to discard, and to separate. Danshari. You have probably heard of it in the context of tidying, the same philosophical root that produced the method that produced the television series, that produced the moment where people across the world sat on their floors, surrounded by everything they owned, asking themselves whether each object sparked joy. That moment was a beginning. Danshari is what happens after the beginning, after the initial clearing, in the ongoing daily relationship with what is allowed into your space and what has earned the right to stay. Applied to a wardrobe, Danshari is not a question about the object. It is a question about the person. Not, is this shirt in good condition? It might be. Not, was this expensive? It probably was. Not, might I wear this someday? You might. The question is, does this belong to who I am today? Not who I was 3 years ago. Not who I plan to be when I lose the weight, or get the promotion, or finally take that trip. Today, the person who will open this wardrobe in the morning and needs something from it that makes the day easier, rather than harder. The person who exists right now, in this body, with this life, with these mornings. Most wardrobes contain 3 categories of clothing. Things that belong to now, things that belong to a past self, and things that belong to a future self that has not arrived. Japan keeps the first category. It releases the second and third, not because the past was not real, or the future is not hoped for, but because the objects of the past and the future have no practical relationship with the morning. They have an emotional relationship with the morning. And that relationship is not, on balance, a nourishing one. Tonight, open the wardrobe, not to organize it, not to assess it, to ask, of each item, a single question. Does this belong to who I am today? The ones that answer yes, stay. The ones that answer anything else, including maybe, and I think so, and it used to, and I hope to, have their answer. In the wardrobe in Kyoto, there are empty hangers. Not because something was taken out and not yet replaced, because empty space was considered part of what belongs in the wardrobe. The gap between garments is not a gap. It is the intentional space that makes the objects around it easier to see, easier to reach, easier to be in relationship with. In a wardrobe, has a practical function so obvious it becomes invisible. When garments are not pressed together, you can see each one, When you can see each one, the decision about which one takes 3 seconds rather than 6 minutes. When the decision takes 3 seconds, the cognitive load is a rounding error. When the cognitive load is a rounding error, the reserve, the decision-making capacity that cortisol depletes and sleep restores, arrives at the workday intact. The empty hanger in a Japanese wardrobe is not absence, it is cost reduction. But ma in a wardrobe has a second function that is harder to measure and more important to understand. A wardrobe that has breathing room is a wardrobe that communicates, at a glance, that it has been thought about, that someone made a choice, not just about what to keep, but about how much to keep, and how the things kept should live in relation to each other. This communication is not for guests. No one else sees your wardrobe on a Tuesday morning. It is for you. At 7:08 a.m., before the day has asked anything of you. When the first visual input of the morning either raises your cortisol or lowers it. An overstuffed wardrobe raises it. Not dramatically, not in a way you would ever identify as stress. In the quiet, accumulative way that objects without space between them communicate, there is more here than has been dealt with. A wardrobe with ma lowers it. Not because anything has been fixed, because something has been decided. And a room where decisions have already been made is a room that does not ask you to make them again. There are clothes in your wardrobe that you feel something when you see. Not pleasure. Not the small, clean recognition of something well-chosen and currently useful. Something else. Something that does not rise to the level of emotion but sits just below it, in the register of the body rather than the mind. A slight tightening, a small, wordless weight. These are the guilt clothes. The dress that no longer fits, but whose removal from the wardrobe feels, somehow, like admitting something. The expensive coat bought during a version of life that has since changed its requirements. The gym kit in the third drawer that has been faithfully laundered and neatly folded and moved around but not, in the past 8 months, worn to a gym. The blouse for the body you were going to have. The suit for the job you were going to get. Each of these garments carries a narrative. And the narrative is not about the garment. It is about the gap between who you are and who the garment represents. And that gap, registered subconsciously every morning through the visual cortex, produces a response in the amygdala that Dr. Saxby's research would recognize immediately. It is not guilt in the way guilt is usually understood. It is the body's acknowledgement that something is unresolved, that a decision was never made, that the garment arrived in the wardrobe carrying a hope or an obligation, and the hope remains unrealized, the obligation unmet, and neither has been formally released. Japan's Danshari principle has a specific application here that is gentler than it sounds. Releasing the guilt clothes is not abandoning the hope. It is acknowledging that the hope does not live in the fabric. It never did. The version of you who was going to lose the weight, take the trip, get the promotion, that person does not need a physical placeholder in your wardrobe to remain possible. She needs space. And the irony of the guilt clothes is that they take up not just physical space but psychological space, the small daily taxation of a reminder that you are not yet who you meant to be. Releasing them does not close the door on who you might become. It removes the daily reminder that you haven't yet. That is not a small thing. At 7:08 in the morning, that is everything. Barack Obama wore gray or blue suits for the 8 years he was president of the United States. When asked about it, his answer was clear. He said he had enough decisions to make. He did not want to make decisions about what he was going to wear. He had read the research on decision fatigue, the finding that the quality of decisions deteriorates as the decision-making mechanism is used, and he had applied a conclusion so simple it sounds almost embarrassing. If you can remove a category of decisions entirely, you should. Japan arrived at this principle through a different route, not the language of optimization, but the philosophy of sufficiency. The idea that having exactly what you need, in exactly the right amount, produces a life that spends less energy on management and more on what the energy is actually for. The Japanese concept of a capsule wardrobe, a small, carefully curated collection of items that all work together, that represent a consistent personal aesthetic, rather than a collection of experiments and impulses and sale purchases, is not minimalism for its own sake. It is the removal of a daily decision, by replacing it with a single larger decision, made once, that covers every subsequent morning. You do not need to wear the same suit every day. You do not need to reduce your wardrobe to 3 colors or 10 items, or any number that someone else has decided is correct. What you need is a wardrobe where the question of what to wear has been answered in advance, where every item works with every other item, where the decision is so small it barely registers as a decision at all. The difference between a wardrobe that requires 6 minutes and a wardrobe that requires 40 seconds is not the number of items. It is the degree to which the person who built the wardrobe did the thinking before the morning, so the morning does not have to do it. The number is not magic. 27 is not a prescription. It is not the answer to a question about how many items of clothing a person should own. It is a number that emerged from a different kind of question entirely. Not how many, but what for. The Japanese wardrobe is built not by subtracting from what exists, but by starting with the life being lived and asking what that life actually requires of clothing. Not the life that might be lived, not the version of the week that has social events and formal occasions and weekend getaways and gym mornings and creative Fridays. The life that is actually happening, the Tuesday, the commute, the desk. The dinner that is most often at home. The walk that happens on Sunday morning. What does that life need from a wardrobe? When the question is answered honestly, the number is usually smaller than the wardrobe currently contains. Not dramatically smaller, in the way of a dramatic life change. Quietly smaller, in the way of someone who looked carefully at what was there and removed what wasn't answering the question. The research on wardrobe size and daily stress is narrow but consistent. A study published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that people who described their homes as cluttered, including closets and wardrobes, had higher levels of cortisol across the day than people who described their homes as restful. The relationship was not causal in a simple direction, but it was persistent. The clutter was not producing the stress the way a stressful event produces stress. It was maintaining it. It was the background frequency against which every other stress of the day resonated. 27 is one woman's answer to the question of what her life requires from her wardrobe. Your number might be different. Your life is different. Your Tuesday is different. But the question is the same. What does your life actually need from the wardrobe it opens every morning? Not what it has. Not what it might need someday. What it needs, now, this week, this season, this version of the life being lived. That question, answered honestly, is the only wardrobe edit you will ever need to make. You are standing in front of the wardrobe in Kyoto for the last time. It is 7:09. You were dressed 40 seconds ago. The coat is by the door, which is where it always is. The bag is packed, which it always is. The day has not asked anything of you yet, and the decision-making reserve that replenished overnight while you slept is intact, waiting for the things that actually need it. The conversation, the problem, the choice that matters. The wardrobe did not touch it. The wardrobe, 40 seconds and done, was not a draw on the reserve. It was a return of it. 5 things made that possible. Danshari, the single question asked of each item. Does this belong to who I am today? Asked once, answered once, and not needing to be asked again until the season changes. Ma, the empty space between garments that is not emptiness but intention. The visual message, sent every morning before the eyes have adjusted, that this wardrobe has been thought about, that you will not have to think about it today. The release of the guilt category, the clothes that carried the gap between who you are and who you intended to be, released not because the intention was wrong, but because the gap does not live in the fabric. It never did. The uniform principle, the decision made once, broadly, in advance, so that every individual morning does not need to make it again. Not the same outfit, the same approach. Every item working with every other item, every morning 40 seconds. The honest question about what this life actually requires, not what the wardrobe contains, not what a future life might need, but what Tuesday requires, and Wednesday, and the weeks that are actually happening. Tonight, you do not need to empty your wardrobe. You do not need to sit on the floor surrounded by every item you own. You do not need to do anything dramatic or complete or final. Tonight, open one drawer. Pick up the first item that gives you that wordless, nameless, small weight when you hold it. The one that is there because getting rid of it never felt urgent enough, not because it belongs. Ask it the question, does this belong to who I am today? If the answer is anything other than yes, you already know. You have always known. The decision was never the hard part. The permission to make it was. That permission was always yours. The wardrobe that takes 40 seconds to open and close is not a wardrobe that contains less. It is a wardrobe that has been asked an honest question and given an honest answer. A wardrobe where every decision was made before the morning arrived, so the morning did not have to spend its budget on things that had already been decided. You do not wake up with unlimited cognitive capacity. You wake up with exactly enough. For the day, for the work, for the conversations and the choices and the moments that actually require it. The woman in Kyoto does not spend any of it on the wardrobe. Neither should you. Tonight, one drawer. One item. One question. The 42nd morning starts there. Share this with someone who has been telling themselves they just need a bigger wardrobe, when what they actually need is a more honest question about the one they already have.